There is no single human being on the planet that ever achieved any kind of great success or achieved anything of value by themselves. I'm a great fan of entrepreneurs who help other entrepreneurs, regardless of their level of success.
And without an expectation of return.
There cannot be an expectation of anything,
Yeah.
of return. The expectation of return makes it a transaction.
Right.
And that's when you start to create these transaction relationships. I'll do it for you if you do it for me. I'll only do it for you if you do it for me. If I do this for you, will you do this for me? It destroys the nature of the human relationship. The nature of a relationship is the willingness to give and no expectation of anything in return. I mean, think about our friends. The value of a friend is not this equitable exchange of
What can she do for me?
Right.
Yeah.
Nope. We don't keep notebooks in our back pockets of all the things we've done for our friends. Tallying how much they've done for us. If a friend asks us to do something, we never say, "Well, I've done 7 things for you this month, and you've done 3 things for me."
Yeah.
The reason our friends are our friends is not by the balance. It's the belief, the undying belief that if we needed them, they would be there no matter what. And when we don't believe that, that's when we start to feel the friendship's unequitable. And that's when we start to say, I do things for you all the time and you never do anything for me. It's not the doing.
Yeah.
It's the belief that if I were to ask, that you would be there for me without question. And when we have that feeling, we give unconditionally. Because we know the one time that we need them, they'll be there. And so any entrepreneur that wants to have mass market success, what we usually do is aim at the majority, which is the place where we see the opportunity, the market. But the reality is the way that ideas spread, the way that things happen, the way that things become mass market is actually quite the opposite. Because the reason the early majority don't jump into something is they won't try something until somebody else has tried it first.
Right.
So what the law of diffusion tells us very simply is that, if you ignore it, everybody gets 10% of your customers or employees who just get it. That's how we describe them. But that's not enough to create a tipping point. To create a tipping point, you need to have between 15 and 18% market penetration. And that doesn't necessarily mean of the market, it means of the people who believe what you believe. So that means telling people about price, quality, service, and features, which is a terrible, hard game to play because it's a game of cat and mouse with the majority, doesn't work as effectively as telling the group of early adopters what you believe. And if they believe what you believe, they will be drawn to you. I'm obsessed with this little model, and it's responsible for the spread of even my work. I don't have a publicist. Neither of my books were reviewed by the New York Times, I have no sort of mass media reviews. I didn't hire anyone to go onto Amazon and put fake things to drive up my ratings. It's all real. And the reason is because I never aimed at the majority. I always talk obsessively about what I believe. The way you introduced me, optimist, immediately you know what I stand for and what I believe, even before I've even said a word, And so those who believe what I believe, those who imagine the world that I imagine are drawn to my work. And if they find it appealing, then they'll tell their friends about it. The same reason I told my friends about it. Because when we find something beautiful, we want to share it with the people we love. You see a good movie, call your friends and say, you got to see this movie. Yeah. Same thing. And if they find it, and so you have these people who are, by the way, have way more credibility than me or any marketing or any advertising or any journalist. When your friend says, you should read this, it's way more inspiring, way more trustworthy than anybody else.
Well, you have the context.
And that's the law of diffusion. And so I've been obsessed and continue to be about finding the people who believe what I believe. And those who say, prove to me why I should read your book, or prove to me why I should, listen to the stuff you say. And the answer is, don't. I'll get you later on. I never try to sell or convince someone that this is interesting. Those who get it are the ones that I'm more interested in.
When you were talking, before you said men and women in uniform, I imagined a Navy SEAL, kind of in that Navy SEAL training, which I can only imagine. You're out there with the logs in the water, and it's late at night, and you're shivering, right? And yeah, you're with all of your comrades, right? But like, it is kind of a lonely proposition because it is sort of survival of the fittest, right? It's every man for himself. You can't help your brother or your sister in that circumstance. So I'm just curious about the courage thing, how that happens. And then I was also thinking about myself, right? So for 15 years, I worked on the client side of brand marketing. I worked for the studios. I had a $30 million P&L. I was fat and happy. Someone picked up my dry cleaning, and I had a car allowance, and I bought all this media, and I did all these great things. And then I got inspired to become a creator, and I cut the cord. And that was about 10 years ago now. And that moment that I cut the cord was and has been a very lonely journey at times, right? I feel alone. I feel somewhat disconnected. And sometimes, I want courage, but how do I get it? You know what I mean?
So let's address the Navy SEAL question first.
Okay.
Your assertion that it's a lonely experience is not entirely true. You'll find that the leaders of those groups will inspire the others. They'll call out to them, "We can do this. Come on, you got this." And something very strange happens when officers quit, because it's officers and enlisted who all go through BUDS together, the Navy SEAL selection process. And almost invariably, when an officer decides to quit, 2 or 3 enlisted guys will quit immediately with him. In other words, that they look to that person. If they stick with it, they'll stick with it. But if they quit, I can quit.
Right.
And there was a Navy SEAL who was interviewed. He was asked, what kind of person makes it through BUDS? And he replied, I can't tell you the kind of person that makes it through BUDS, but I can tell you the kind of person who doesn't make it through. He said the guys that come in with bulging muscles covered in tattoos who want to prove to everybody how strong they are, none of those guys make it through. He said the preening leaders who just delegate all their responsibility, none of those guys make it through. He said the star college athletes who've never been pushed to the core of their being, none of those guys make it through. He said some of the guys who make it through are skinny and scrawny. Some of the guys who make it through, you see them shivering out of fear. He says, but all of the guys who make it through, when they're physically exhausted, when they're emotionally exhausted, when they have nothing left to give, somehow, some way, they're able to dig down deep inside of them to find the energy to help the guy next to them. Those are the guys who become SEALs. It is absolutely that. So our most elite warriors on the planet are not necessarily the strongest, not necessarily the smartest, not necessarily the fittest, but they are most capable of taking care of each other. And that's what makes them the most elite.
And so it was really a dark period, I have to admit. It was really a dark place. And there was a confluence of events that I'm immensely grateful for. When I learned how the human brain works, I learned how decisions happen. And that every single organization on the planet, even our own careers, always function on the same 3 levels. What we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And you have to have all 3. I knew what I did. I knew how I did it. I knew how I was different or special compared to my competitors. But I couldn't tell you why I was doing what I was doing. And so I became obsessed with learning my why.
So give us some examples. I mean, there's lots of companies that know what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They make a computer product, or
Sure.
their engine is bigger or faster,
Yeah.
or better gas mileage than the other. But why is it that understanding the why is so critical?
I mean, look, the example I always use, and the example that's sort of I've become known to use, is the Apple example. Apple doesn't start by talking about what they do. They start by talking about what they believe. If Apple spoke like anybody else, they'd start with what they do. We make great computers. How do they do it? They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Right? But they start with why. Everything we do, they say, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? It's totally different.
Right.
And it actually feels different. And the reason is because the organization, the order of the communication, the order of the information goes to the limbic brain. The limbic brain is the part of the brain that makes all our decisions. It's also responsible for all of our feelings and emotions, which is why we're told we have to make emotional connections.
Right.
That doesn't mean make people cry. That means go to the part of the brain that's responsible for decision making.
Is that why we say, I just know it in my heart, or I feel it in my gut?
Correct. Yeah, you don't know anything in
It's
your
not
heart,
logical.
and nothing's happening in your stomach, right? That's not where behavior happens. We say that because the part of the brain that controls language, and which is the neocortex, also controls rational and analytical thought, but it's not the limbic brain. And so we have trouble articulating why we make decisions or why we feel the way we do towards somebody. That's why we speak in metaphors and analogies all the time. You know, we sit down in a relationship, we're struggling and we don't know how to express the emotions, and we say, it's like this. I feel like I'm on a train that's heading down the track and I can see the cliff, and we're trying to articulate what we feel.
I just know, I feel it in my bones.
I feel it in my bones. We start to use stories and things like that. That's why story is so important. But yeah, no, it's all biology. The best definition of love I ever heard is giving someone the power to destroy you and trusting they won't use it, which I love. I think it's the same in business. When we make ourselves vulnerable, even to our own employees, to our own partners, to our own colleagues, then we give them the power to destroy the business and trust that they won't. You know, in other words, we give people responsibility.
Yeah.
And we don't double check their work.
And if they take a few extra dollars from the cash register, then it's on them.
You know, in highly trusted and trusting organizations, that doesn't happen. I was hanging out with some of the senior folks from Container Store recently, and I know it's a well-run organization. I know they take care of their people. I know their people feel safe and they like working there. And so I asked a question. I knew what the answer was, but I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. I said, "Do you check people's bags when they leave? You know, the people who work in your retail operations. Do you check their bags before they leave at night?" And they looked at me and said, "Why would we need to do that?" You compare that to a lot of other retail enterprises.
Full body scans.
You have to check the bags to see that they're not. In other words, when we treat people with respect and we hire people who believe what we believe and we treat people like human beings. Are there people who steal? Of course. There's always bad eggs. Of course. But does that mean everybody steals? Of course not. So why do we treat everybody like a criminal? You know?
But it can become a culture. I've spent time in Japan, and I was amazed to see thousands and thousands and thousands of bikes.
Yeah, with no
all
locks.
Unlocked.
Or decorative locks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or people who walk into a coffee shop and put their phone and their wallet on the table to hold the table when they go to the bathroom, as opposed to your jacket, which we could lose, but not the wallet or phone, right?
Yeah. So what do you say to the people that would push back and just say, you know, that's a really great notion. It's a very romantic thought.
It is idealistic, isn't it?
But I've given so much, and all everyone seems to do is just take, and that doesn't pay the bills.
Well, there's a lot of different thoughts going on in there, right? Which is, I think when somebody says all I do is give and all others ever do is take, I would question the nature of how they're defining giving. You know, I keep paying them more, and that's not what people want. People want to feel safe, remember? They want to be treated like human beings. They want to be given responsibility and opportunity. They want to feel valued and valuable. They want our time. They want us to help them grow. It also may be that there were some bad choices made, that you hired people or chose to give to people for your expediency and not because they actually believe what you believe. Your resume is brilliant. You worked for my biggest competitor. You've grown. You know how to build a business. You're hired, but you never actually got to know them and find out who they are. If you actually get along with them, you don't know if they're a good fit culturally. So that was a selfish hire. So I think there's some accountability. If somebody actually says, everybody always takes from me, you know, I like to joke, there's only one common factor in all my failed relationships, me, right? So it's the same thing, that everyone's always taking from you. There's only one common factor in all of these experiences, which is you. So maybe a little introspection. And does it pay the bills? In the short term, you can bash people over the head and treat them like numbers, and in the short term you will gain. Over the long term, it doesn't work. What I talk about is idealistic, absolutely, but it works over time. If you want to build a fast growth business, ignore everything I'm telling you. If you want to build a stable business, if you want to build a business that lasts, that potentially could outlast you, and most importantly, that if you took a vacation and you didn't check your phone or your computer, everything would work fine.
Or while the cat's away, the mice won't play.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
In fact, while the cat's away, the mice will work harder because they don't want to let you down. They want to make you proud. They want to prove to you that all of your sacrifice and belief in them was worth it. It's an amazing feeling when that happens. But like any kind of relationship, it doesn't happen overnight.